All right, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how I approach drawing a tank. So I'm going to start off by establishing a 2-point perspective, almost like a wedge shape that I'm going to use here. And this wedge shape is has two vanishing points. We have these two lines up here at the top that are moving towards the left vanishing point, and we have these two lines over here that are moving towards the right vanishing point. So let's go ahead and center that, and let's identify some of the key shapes that we want to work with. So I'm going to find a midpoint, and I'm going to extend that midpoint, and then we're going to have, this is our primary shape here that we're going to be working with. And we can always, I'm kind of making this as a composite of a few different tanks here, so I'm not necessarily using a specific reference here, but you know, this is kind of like a World War II type of tank that I'll be working on. And the real key here is to remember that all of the lines that I'm drawing that are facing left, that are moving towards this angle, are going to move towards the same vanishing point roughly. And then similarly, this will be moving towards the right vanishing point. I'm going to find the midpoint, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to indicate where the treads are going to be. So the treads, I'll just first of all start off by drawing some vertical lines to establish where I want the treads to be. From there, I know the treads have a certain amount of thickness, right? So let's go ahead and just kind of define a bounding box that is kind of projected out from the body of the tank. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Now what I would like to do is I'd like to carve into that shape. So I know that when you're dealing with tank treads, you're going to have a certain part of the treads kind of moving down. And you'll also have something similar on the opposite side. Usually there's some kind of a wheel, right? And there might be a series of wheels here. And each of these wheels are going to have an associated thickness. And there might be some wheels sitting at the top. And so I'll draw the thickness of each of these wheels. Thinking about the underlying shape. Giving a little bit of dimension. Identifying the center. And then now I can draw my curvature. Don't forget, the tread actually kind of extends all the way through on both sides, and there's also other objects that are here, some mechanical structures. There might be a few hidden wheels in the back. All of these details are broken down into simple volumetric shapes. You're going from primary shape to adding your secondary shapes in. I'm not starting with any detail on these drawings. Okay, so now I have to have that skirt that kind of keeps the tread from kicking up dirt and dust onto the tank itself. That skirt goes all the way over here. This is relatively straight. There might be a couple of boxes, other knickknacks that kind of add to the structure of this tank. These are some brackets. All right, so now let's consider what the front of this tank will look like. Again, going back towards the same vanishing point, there might be a few additional hooks, other doodads. All these details are essentially anything that's man-made that is going to have some kind of a structural shape to it. We'll just draw the barrel of this tank. So now we have the underlying structure in place. We can start to think about how we want to explore the tread. So I'll just drop the opacity on this layer, make a new layer above it, and let's define the tread. Treads are basically like little links. And each of these lines are going to go back towards the same left vanishing point. It doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is to make it look believable. Now we can draw the wheels. So essentially this is my second pass. I'll put a link to the brush that I'm using in the description in case you're interested. I start with the structure first before moving into details. So now I can hide my underlying layer. I can see what I have. And from this point, what I can do is I can start to indicate where I want my shadows to be. I'm going to just have all this area up here be covered by shadow. So I'm just making sure that I'm giving myself the opportunity to close any gaps. You can add even more details and bells and whistles and other gizmos to kind of really give this tank some structure. Something that I like to include is just a few little errant dots to kind of give this thing a sense of wear and tear. And now I'll come back in with my poly lasso tool just to clean up a few areas. Like so. Let's touch up the barrel. Conveying a sense of solidity in your structures is very, very important. You want this thing to feel solid, right? So here's some of the treads underneath. And now what I can do is I can flip this. I typically have a keyboard shortcut assigned to flipping my composition. If you go under Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, You can make that into a custom keyboard shortcut. I talk about that in one of my earlier videos. But the reason we do this is just to go ahead and ensure that we're not skewing the vehicle, that it doesn't look off. So I can just adjust it. And then I can flip it back. In fact, I'll show you that keyboard shortcut right now. If you go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, and you'll get an application dialog box that pops up. You go under Edit, Transform, and I can switch that to Command H, and it'll say that this keyboard shortcut is already in use and will be removed from View Extras. Okay, no problem. I never use View Extras, so I'm okay with doing that. So now I've got an easy way that I can flip. I can turn on my grids to go ahead and make sure everything looks all right. And now let's scale this object up. And we'll drop its lightness down. And the next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and add some color. Before I add some color, let me just change to a black color and close any gaps. Now this is just a sketch. The big takeaway that I want you to get from this video is the underlying box that I'm using to draw this tank. The perspective is very, very important. Yes, I'm kind of rushing through this. It's not like a super detailed drawing, but the intent is to show that, you know, with just a little bit of perspective knowledge, you should be able to draw vehicles of any type, whether they're cars, trucks, buses, etc. You can do it. You can definitely do this. And then we'll just shade these in like so. Okay, so let's make sure I've closed all my gaps. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it'll make my coloring process that much simpler if the gaps are closed. You don't have to do this, but this is just what I do. Let's use my magic wand tool. This is a new version. I'm using the Apple Silicon version of Photoshop for the first time. I just happened to pick up one of the new MacBook Pros very recently, and I'm kind of putting it through its paces. My first impression of using the MacBook Pro with Photoshop is very favorable. I'm very pleased with how smooth and how fast the entire operating system is and how smooth the commands are. I'm moving up from a 2008 Mac Mini, and I can definitely see, or 2018, sorry, Mac Mini, and I can definitely see the difference between the two devices. So let's see, I can't seem to find the gap. Let's see. This is the part that takes a little bit longer. Sometimes it can be very, very subtle. Oh, there we go, right up here at the barrel. Yep, that did it. Okay, so let's zoom out. What I've done is I've selected everything outside of the tank. I'll make a brand new layer, and I'll do an inverse, Shift Command I or Shift Control I. And at this point I can pick a greenish value. And then I can dial it with the hue and saturation. I want to think about the light source. Where is the light coming from for this particular image? It might be interesting, for example, if I have the light source coming in from the left, and what that'll do is it'll make everything that's on the right bathed in shadow. Let's use my magic wand tool. Let's clear up that barrel. Didn't want that. We'll maybe have the top of the barrel reflect that same value. So again, go back to the base, Command J, select it, sample the same color. And then for the facing side over here, that's going to be fairly dark. I can make the treads a different color. So again, I'm going to go back to the base layer. This time using my polygon lasso tool. Command J, Command U. Let's go ahead and desaturate it. Make it a little bit darker. And then we'll reveal the green that is the wheels. By making a selection and cutting it. And over here we want to have the same basic value, so I'll go up to that layer. Command J, Command U, desaturate it. I can always do a grayscale test. If you go to View, Proof Setup, and you go to Custom, under Device to Simulate, I like to choose Working Gray. And this tells me that I could probably push my contrast values a little bit more. So let me just go back to the base color of the tank and make it a little bit darker. And let's do a grayscale test. It's looking better. And let's do one more thing. Let's take the same wheels. Command J, Command U. I'm going to make that a little bit darker, just so that it stands out as being a little bit different. And then now I've got my tank. And then maybe the last thing I'll do here for this video, since I don't want it to go on forever, is just to create some kind of a ground plane or some implied ground plane. Shadows tend to do a pretty good job of that. But you can also draw some kind of a terrain. Think about your foreground, midground, background color values. Think about any kind of depth that you want to achieve. So maybe there's a bunch of rocks. And in order to give these some depth, let's just fill some of these things in with black. You know, it might be kind of nice to know what the sense of scale is. So maybe putting some kind of a bombed out building or something where you see some of the structures. So now we have certain things in the background here. I can add a quick color behind the whole thing. Since I'm dealing with a lot of greens, I'm going to choose its complement, which is kind of a red-orange. I'll take this foreground rock. Give it a darker value so it kind of pops more in the foreground. And then for the buildings that are in the distance, just make some rough selections. I'm just going to move this underneath the layer. And there's no white in this drawing, so one thing that you could do is you could, just to give this a more broader value range, just to add, you know, some element of white. Kind of gives you a focal point. Maybe this thing is already fired. It's just kind of moving on. So anyway, I hope you found this video to be useful. Thank you again for watching. Also wanted to congratulate all of you for giving me the opportunity and the platform to go ahead and create this channel. And we just celebrated 400 subscribers. So thank you for watching. I do appreciate everything that you're doing. Let me know if there are any video ideas that you have for future videos, and I will see you in the next one.